نجد للألم حضور ممتد في فلسفة الشرق والغرب. لماذا هذا الاهتمام في هذا الموضوع تحديدا؟
So I think pain is a kind of revelation that the body is undeniably presenting to us. So if we're in pain, it's very difficult to deny that to ourselves. It's a kind of the intrusion of reality on our sort of psychological condition. So we're not really able to be floating free of the body or being completely. Imagine trying in some meditative state to to continue indefinitely as a purely spiritual being or a purely meditative being. Eventually, you'll get hungry. You'll be forced to eat.
Mm.
I think what's striking about pain is it forces us in many ways to be realists about the world around us, about our own bodies. It's a kind of imposition or revelation that's undeniable. So it's understandable that it would be a starting point for philosophy. It's hard to think of what an illusory pain would be, for example. So an illusory pain, if it's felt as pain, is a pain, right? So the question of illusion versus reality almost doesn't arise in the case of pain. So I think it's natural that pain would be a subject of great philosophical interest. So it varies in different traditions, but I would say that's it's undeniable.
Yeah. لماذا بعض التجارب المؤلمة قد تسحق الإنسان ونفس التجربة هذه لشخص آخر ربما قد تقومه وتقويه؟ ما هو الحد الفاصل والمعيار في ذلك؟
Okay, that's a really challenging question. I'm not sure I have a good answer, but I would say that we should recognize that we are all crushable, that we can all be crushed at some point. The limit of our tolerance will vary, but I think insofar as we're finite beings, we are all subject to being defeated and crushed in some capacity.
ربما أيضا في معيار مهم في تحديد قابليتنا لتحمل الألم اللي هي البيئة. بالتأكيد أن في بعض البيئات تصنع منا نسخ أقوى لتحمل الألم، وفي بيئات أخرى لا تصنع مننا نسخ ضعيفة. ما رأيك بعلاقة البيئة في تحمل الألم؟
Yeah, in some ways, we could say that the environment does modify our resilience with respect to pain or our ability to tolerate pain in various dimensions. So um, I think of the kind of work that my grandfather used to do and the kinds of physical strain that people of his generation went through. And I imagine that it would be difficult for many modern people to tolerate that kind of physical pain. But we have technologies for managing physical pain. We can develop extraordinary capacities to run long distances, to exercise in ways that our ancestors would have found, unimaginably challenging, etc. So it's true. I wouldn't want to say that we're necessarily weaker in all dimensions in modern society. I think in some ways we're much tougher, maybe harder in ways, as we were talking about earlier, harder and more cruel with one another in ways that our ancestors couldn't have possibly imagined or coped with. I think just we are capable of kinds of social pain or social isolation. We can tolerate that to a degree that would have been very difficult for people in traditional societies to manage. So I think you're certainly right that there's some relationship to the environment. Yeah.
منذ التاريخ هناك علاقة وثيقة ما بين الألم وفلسفة الأخلاق. في بعض الأحيان يستخدم الألم كأداة لحفظ الأخلاق وتقويم الأخلاق، وحتى بالنسبة للأطفال أيضا بعض العقوبة لهم قد تكون مؤلمة تساعدهم في التقويم. ما أدري هل الأمر هذا يحتاج إعادة نظر أو فحص من جديد؟
That's a very difficult question. I think on the one hand, we recognize that we've made genuine progress insofar as we've abolished torture, we've abolished slavery, we've abolished levels of human cruelty to one another and physical abuse of one another as part of the justice system in most places. I think it's unquestionably moral progress. My own view is that the legal system ought to acknowledge the agency of its subjects. It ought to acknowledge the dignity of its subjects. And it ought to, in fact, I don't think we can really talk about praise and blame without ascribing agency to criminals or to one another. And I would say, insofar as there is no justice system without some basic conception of agency, there's also an implicit acknowledgement of the importance and value of an agent, of a human moral person that goes along with that. And insofar as our physical abuse of prisoners or our execution of prisoners is negating what we take to be their dignity or their value, then it would be better not to do so. The center of a just system of punishment should be the concept of the human person.
عندما نتحدث عن الألم، الأمر لا يتعلق فينا كبشر فقط، حتى عند الحيوانات وأخلاقياتنا تجاهها. حدثنا عن هذا الموضوع والألم عند الحيوانات تحديداً.
I would say again that when we think about what's morally relevant, we should distinguish between pain and suffering. So causing unnecessary suffering to animals, I think, is morally blameworthy. We shouldn't cause unnecessary suffering to animals. But in order to understand what we mean by suffering in animals, we have to take the animals seriously. And what I mean by that is we don't just project our own experience onto animal life. So you have a kind of, in the animal rights movement in the United States, kind of a Disney picture of animals, that they are basically furry, defective human beings. And their pain is like our pain. Their suffering is like our suffering. I think that's a misunderstanding of animals. I think it's a kind of a falsification of animal nature. Animals are much stranger and more interesting than a kind of an animal rights perspective would give them credit for. So it's also the case that I don't think that animal pain is as morally relevant as some, for example, utilitarian philosophers have suggested. In part because I don't think pain per se is that morally interesting or morally relevant. So a lot of what we need to do is study what causes animals to suffer. And that involves studying their nature and what they are. So it might be for example, that it's far more cruel to make a dog live an isolated life on a chain, for example, even though he doesn't feel any physical pain, he might be well fed, etc. If we understood what the dog's nature is, that the dog is social, that he needs to be with other people and dogs, that he needs to be with dogs and humans, etc., that he needs a social world, and that tying him to a chain or whatever and leaving him out there is causes him suffering. I think that one of the defects of the animal rights movement has been its lack of recognition of, what it is that makes particular kinds of animals what they are. So in many ways, the domesticated animals are what they are in virtue of their relationship to us. So cows are what they are in virtue of their relationship to human beings, and in virtue of their relationship to their role in agricultural production. But we can cause animals, we can cause cows and chickens and pigs to suffer terribly in virtue of the way we organize their lives. So obviously the factory farm phenomenon has been taken seriously by animal rights folks, but really it's important to recognize that what matters to the animals might not be what would matter to us necessarily, and that their kind of suffering is different from our kind of suffering. What causes an animal to suffer might be very different than what causes a human being to suffer. So I do think we have moral responsibilities to animals. We don't have a moral responsibility to make sure that animals continue to live, but I think we do have some responsibility with respect to animal suffering, and we ought to honor that responsibility.
ماذا ستختار؟ حقيقة مؤلمة أم وهم سعيد؟
Well, I would choose the sad truth, the dark truth.
Why?
I guess first thing I would say is that there are lots of illusions. There's only one truth. So in that sense, truth is a rarer thing than an illusion. Again, I would say that it indicates something about me. That indicates that, at least I would like to think that truth is a value for me more than, let's say, my personal happiness. So that we would say, if you were a scientist, for example, this is common. So if you're a scientist, you would prefer to be proven wrong than get credit for a falsehood. Right. So that would be another way of coming at that ordering of what we care about. It's this idea of a happy illusion. I'm not sure what that would be worth exactly. I mean, it wouldn't be happy in the evaluative sense for me, because I would think that if you lived a deluded life, I wouldn't call it a happy life. You might feel happy, but in some more basic evaluative sense, it's not a genuinely blessed or happy life to be living an illusion. It's not even in some ways, not even a fully human life.